3 days ago, on a Friday evening around 7:30 p.m., I arrived at Toby's Bar and Grill feeling completely exhausted after spending the last 2 days in New York City, wrapping up negotiations with a major international bank. When the day began, I was doubtful that we would successfully finalize a deal. However, shortly after our Friday meeting kicked off, the remaining obstacles began to fall away one by one, much like dominoes. By noon, only 2 issues were still unresolved. We decided to take a break and have lunch separately. I discovered a nearby Jewish deli, ordered an indulgently large pastrami and Swiss on rye, and relished every bite. When we gathered again at 1:30, George Willis, the bank's chief negotiator, stated, "We've achieved significant progress. I suggest we meet halfway on the final 2 issues." George handed a document across the conference table, and I reviewed his proposal. It certainly wasn't merely meeting halfway, but it was well within what my partners and I were willing to accept to secure this major contract. I signed my initials on the page, and George mentioned he would send a formal contract via email on Monday. After exchanging handshakes, everyone dispersed in different directions. I returned to my hotel, packed my belongings, and checked out. I thought about staying in the city for the night since my fiancée, Trish, was spending the weekend with her 2 older sisters. They were staying at one of Connecticut's large Indian casinos, planning to enjoy the pool and spa during the day and frequent upscale bars and restaurants in the evenings. Choosing not to spend another night away from home, I made my way to Grand Central Station and boarded the Metro North train to New Haven. By 7:30, I had driven up on 91 towards Hartford and took the exit off the highway. Passing through the consistently bustling downtown West Hartford, I decided to stop for dinner. While sitting in Toby's bar area, I noticed my 2 future sisters-in-law through the bar mirror as they approached a horseshoe-shaped table. Their husbands joined them shortly after. A sudden knot formed in my stomach, and a sharp pain seemed to radiate throughout my body, signaling that my wedding plans, just 8 weeks away, were jeopardized. My sisters-in-law were supposed to be at the casino with Trish. After making eye contact with the bartender, I told Michael, "I need to step outside for a bit. I promise I'll return." "No worries, Chris. Is it all right if I place your drink on the shelf and attend to this table?" Michael responded as he took my glass. I agreed and left Toby's. Sitting in my car at the back of the parking lot, I mentally outlined my next steps. I called Trish, and she answered, "Hey, love. How's the big city?" "Everything's business as usual. We've just completed a successful negotiation, and I'm about to go out for dinner. I wish you were here with me." "That's so sweet, Chris. I miss you too. We've had a fantastic day, relaxing by the pool and enjoying some drinks. I'm getting a good head start on my wedding tan. I'll be meeting my sisters for dinner in a few minutes." Trish and I continued our conversation for a little while longer, exchanged "I love you," and then ended the call. I accessed the Find My Phone application and entered Trish's details. Although I couldn't determine Trish's exact location, her phone was detected in Falmouth, Massachusetts, situated on the western side of Cape Cod. Damn, I thought. Nick Flaherty, Trish's longtime neighbor and friend, owned a family residence in Falmouth. We had received several invitations there over time. As I reviewed my contacts, I located Sue Flaherty's mobile number. I dialed the number, and when Sue picked up, I greeted her. "Hi, Sue. It's Chris Harrington." "Sue, Chris Harrington! What a wonderful surprise! How are the wedding preparations going? Nick and I are excited to attend," she replied enthusiastically. I admitted, "Honestly, I'm not certain how the preparations are progressing." Sue chuckled and remarked, "That's such a typical guy response." I then asked, "Hey, Sue, what are the odds that Nick is traveling this weekend?" "That's a strange question. Nick rarely needs to travel on weekends, but he is away this weekend. What's going on?" Sue responded, her voice tinged with worry. "Before I explain, can I ask you something? Do you have a Find My Phone app on your device?" Sue let out an uncontrollable sob and whispered, "Not again." A minute later, she added, He was supposed to be in Philadelphia, but the tracker indicates he's at his family's cottage. With a heavy sigh, I replied, I'm sorry, Sue. Nick and Trish are together. Sue silently cried for several minutes. This isn't the first time, she confessed. I'm going to call that jerk and tell him not to come home. Can I ask you a favor, Sue? When she didn't respond, I continued. Trish won't be back until Sunday afternoon. Nick is the same. I proposed, let's postpone our confrontation until tomorrow night. In the meantime, I'll change the locks on my condo and take half of the wedding money from our joint account. I'll pack all her clothes and personal items and leave the bags in the driveway. You're right, Chris. I'll do the same. Please text or call if you need someone to talk to. I'm sorry I had to reach out. Sue started crying again and, between sobs, said, It's not your fault, Chris. My last call was to Billy Jones, a friend and neighbor. He answered, Hey, Topher, what's up? I need some assistance, Billy. Are you available tomorrow morning? My only plans are to sleep until noon, but Sally will wake me up at 7. What do you need? Could you possibly change the locks on my front door and the door leading from the garage? I'd also appreciate it if you could update the code on the garage door opener. There was a brief pause before Billy exclaimed, Damn! Is the wedding canceled? Unless there's something major I'm unaware of, Trish and I are finished. Got it, Topher. I'll go to Lowe's first thing in the morning and have everything changed by late morning. Does that work for you? Absolutely, Billy. Thanks. Feeling like I was 20 years older, I trudged back into Toby's and headed to the bar. I glanced in the mirror, seeing the reflection of my sisters-in-law and their husbands as Michael handed me my bourbon. The server was clearing their appetizers. I grabbed a bar stool and, with my drink in hand, made my way to my ex-future family's table. Michael called out, Hey, Chris, you can't take the stool from the... My furious glare silenced Michael instantly. When I dropped the stool at the table's end, took my seat, and cast an angry glance between Julie and Karen, the mood quickly turned icy. Chris, hey there! Join us in the booth. We'll bring you a menu, Karen's husband, Steve, called out. Keeping my focus on the women, I replied, No thanks, Steve. I won't be here long. I continued to silently glare at Julie and Karen until Julie's husband, Roy, asked, What's going on, Chris? Ask your wife, Roy. Roy and Steve faced their wives, clearly noticing their fear. What's happening? Steve questioned the sisters. Karen was the first to respond, saying, It's not what you think, Chris. The tension thickened as I stared across the table at Karen. I'm assuming it's exactly what I think it is, I told everyone. Steve and Roy shifted their attention between their wives on one side of the table and me on the other. As tears began to stream down Karen's face, Steve insisted, What's going on, Chris? Your wives are covering for Trish. They were all together in my kitchen last Tuesday. Since I was going out of town until Sunday, they went to Foxwoods Casino for a weekend getaway. Where is Trish? Roy inquired of the sisters. When they didn't respond, he turned his attention to me. She's at Nick's house in Cape Cod. Is that true? Steve whispered angrily. By now, both women were in tears. Karen nodded in agreement. Julie sobbed. Trish loves you, Chris. She really does. Steve sighed, and Roy stared angrily at the table. She has her own way of expressing love. She and her sisters deceive me, and she spends a weekend with an old crush from the neighborhood for a meaningless hookup just 8 weeks before our wedding. Your sister is a total jerk. Don't you dare! Roy cut off his wife, shouting, Shut the fuck up, Julie! Then he looked at me and demanded, What are you going to do? I'm going to call off the wedding. Both friends leaned back in their seats as their wives cried even harder. Dad has invested so much money into the wedding and reception, Karen protested. I don't care. I'm not going to marry a lying, cheating, a girl of easy virtue like Trish. I paused for a moment before addressing the group. I've informed Sue Flaherty that Nick is cheating with Trish. We both need 24 hours before we take them down. 4 pairs of eyes were on me as I turned to Roy and Steve. "I need your assistance. Can you ensure—" I glanced at their wives. "Can you make sure they don't contact Trish until 6:15 p.m. tomorrow night?" Both women began to object, but Steve replied, "We sure can, buddy." Then, addressing his wife, he added, "I'm disgusted with you. I have to wonder if your sisters have ever covered for you when you cheated on me." Karen was taken aback as Steve continued, "If you or Julie reach out to Trish in any way, I'll consider filing for divorce." Roy's face turned bright red with anger when he said, "Given the difficulties we faced at the beginning of our 3rd year together, I might pursue a divorce no matter what. But understand, I will definitely go through with it if you reach out to Trish." Julie let out a mournful groan. I shook hands with both men and left the restaurant. Saturday was hectic. It took me several hours to eliminate the last traces of Trish from our home. Instead of leaving the full garbage bags in the driveway, I rented a small storage unit, and my neighbor Billy lent me his pickup truck. It only required 3 trips to remove all the bags from my property. The most challenging part of my day was drafting an email to our wedding guests. I worked on it intermittently throughout the day. The email was as follows. Subject: Update on the Harrington and Clark wedding, dear friends. I'm currently navigating a difficult weekend, just 8 weeks away from my wedding day to Trish Clark. This weekend has been particularly tough because I found out that Trish has been unfaithful and spent time with another man. Trish and her longtime neighbor, Nick Flaherty, deceived both me and Nick's wife, Sue. With the support of Trish's sisters, Karen and Julie, and their dishonesty, Trish and Nick are spending this weekend together on Cape Cod. You might be wondering why I refer to this terrible behavior as spectacular. The reason is simple. I'm not legally married to Trish. It's much easier to call off the wedding than to endure the heartbreak of a divorce. This email serves as my official notice that I am canceling my wedding to Trish Clark. Sincerely, Christopher Harrington. I reached out to Sue Flaherty at 5:30 p.m. on Saturday afternoon. Together, we updated each other on the progress we had made with our respective tasks. Since Sue was married, her separation from Nick would prove to be significantly more challenging. On Saturday morning, she managed to consult with an attorney and had set up another meeting for Monday morning. The lawyer advised her to cancel their joint credit cards and, as much as possible, separate their finances. This was standard legal guidance for divorce cases. Our conversation wrapped up just before 6 p.m., and we agreed to text our spouses precisely at 6 p.m. My message was straightforward. I hope you're enjoying your weekend with Nick. Thank you for proving to me and everyone else that you're a liar, a cheat, and a girl of easy virtue. Our wedding is off. I sent the text exactly at 6 p.m., and moments later, I emailed our family and guests. 16 months later, I stood nervously at the altar. My best man and groomsmen stood to my left, while the maid of honor and bridesmaids gracefully walked down the center aisle of the church, each one as stunning as the next. Tears welled up in my eyes as I glanced toward the back of the church. Trish's father stood proudly in his black tuxedo, his gaze fixed on the most beautiful bride anyone had ever seen. Her blonde hair was elegantly styled and shimmered beneath a delicate white veil. Her blue eyes sparkled with love, and her deep red lips hinted at the anticipation of our forthcoming wedding night. The form-fitting white wedding dress accentuated her flawless figure without appearing inappropriate. It was absolutely perfect. As Mr. Clark and my bride began their walk down the aisle toward me, I felt a piercing gaze scrutinizing me. I looked around at the guests on my side of the church before turning my attention to the bride's side. That's when I noticed Trish. Tears streamed down her face as she silently mouthed, "I'm sorry," before turning toward her father and youngest sister as they approached me.